Welcome back. Previously we have learned the concept of cooperation and the cooperative movement in different parts of the world, and we have discussed in detail the cooperative movement that was running in different parts of the world, basically in European countries as well as Asian countries. So in this module we will be discussing about the concept of cooperative movement and how the cooperative movement was implemented in Africa and how it helped the economy towards development. So before we further go into Africa and cooperative movement in Africa, you need to familiarize some aspects. We all know that the implementation of cooperative movement in different parts of the world, because of the economic conditions and the exploitation of weaker sections of the society, led to the implementation of cooperative movement in different parts of the world. So before we go further into the cooperative movement in Africa, you need to remember the concept that even before the implementation of cooperative movement in different parts of the world, the concept of cooperative movement or the idea of cooperative movement was in existence in Africa for centuries. Even though the concept of cooperation and the term cooperation was introduced in the 18th century, even before that the concept of cooperative activity was running in Africa. But during that period there was no name like cooperation or cooperative movement, but the system of cooperation was implemented in Africa. And we all know Africa is a continent. It comprises of a number of countries, and most of the countries are still underdeveloped and developing countries. And just like our country, Africa was once a colony of various European countries, and the cooperative movement has made different changes during the colonial period also. So in this module we will be learning the concept of cooperative movement in Africa, what was the first type of cooperative movements in the Africa, and how it has been changed and evolved during the colonial period, after the colonial period, and the modern concept. And in this module we will be also learning about the concept International Labour Organization and various actions of United Nations for the helping the African countries. Here, the efforts of United Nations Development Program, otherwise known as UNDP, and initiative of the ILO. ILO means International Labour Organization of Cooperatives, under the title Job Creation Poverty Eradication in Africa. The modern cooperative movement in Africa is run on the basis of this concept, that is job creation and poverty eradication in Africa. The action was implemented by the efforts of United Nations and International Labour Organization. Remember, cooperative movement was already in existence in Africa, and the modern concept is running on the basis of these programs. So why Africa was a place of cooperatives? Earlier I have mentioned that a different type of cooperative system was in operation or in running in Africa for centuries, and why the concept of cooperation was implemented in Africa. Just like which we have learned before, the condition of the people in Africa was very poor and they were exploited by the middlemen and the rich people. So in order to protect and save them, the cooperative movement was introduced in Africa. And regarding the modern point of view, why the cooperative is implemented in Africa, or why the Africa was a place for cooperatives, is because of its unique geographical features, climatic features, and ineffective utilization of resources. Regarding unique geographical and climatic features, why that is a feature, reason is that most of the cooperative movement will be based on agriculture cooperatives. So in agriculture, these two factors is of great importance, unique geographical factors as well as climatic features. And regarding ineffective utilization of resources, means African is a land of abundant resources. The thing is that the country doesn't know how to effectively utilize those resources. In that situation, many other countries and many other mercenaries were exploiting this country. So in order to remove that and for effective utilization of resources, the modern cooperative movement runs on the base of this UN United Nations Development Program and ILO. That is a general concept. So regarding cooperatives in Africa during different periods, as I have mentioned earlier, the concept of cooperation was in long existence in Africa, even though the cooperation name was not discovered during that period, but some type of cooperative system was in running during that phase. So in general, the cooperative in Africa can be classified into two phases. One is a traditional phase and another is a modern phase. Traditional phase is the older version, means the system of a type of cooperation that was implemented in Africa before centuries. Centuries means even before the concept of these crocodile principles and first cooperative movement in United Kingdom, in its Britain. That is known as traditional concept. In modern concept, we will be discussing about two phases. There will be two phases in modern concept. That is during colonial period. That is first phase, and the second phase is after colonial period. We will discuss that part during the modern section. Right now, let us go with the traditional concept. So, traditional forms of cooperative. Even before the implementation of the cooperative principles or the term cooperation in the world, a type of cooperative movements and actions were taken place in Africa. We will discuss about each of the traditional forms of cooperatives in Africa. First one, Rotating Savings and Credit Association, otherwise known as ROSCAS. They are called tontines in French, means speaking Africa. These groups are omnipresent on the continent, means that we are in the continent for a long period of time. They have mutual social assistance in addition to savings and credit aspects. These groups are able to provide an opportunity to meet and celebrate as a group. These were the first type of cooperative movement in Africa even before centuries. They were having a mutual social existence otherwise, and also at the same time they helped in promoting savings and credit. There were many associations that works on cooperative styles. Usually those associations include mutual working sharing or labor intensive ventures, construction harvesting. Likewise, there were corporate activities of cooperation in different areas of the economy. Next one, Ubindin in Africa and Umoja in East Africa. These two are types of cooperative activity that was running in African as well as Eastern African. So, what was the activity behind these two movements? These are the traditional cooperation providing social assistance to community members in need. These are the main activity of these two cooperative movements. And finally, burial societies prevalent in Southern Africa and Ethiopia. Their main actions or activities include providing micro insurance to the needy sections of the people. So these are some of the types of cooperative movements that were in existence even before the colonial period. Colonial period means even before the colonialization. Like means just like we were once a colony of Britain, we were once a colony of France, Portuguese, Dutch, likewise. Just like that, many of the underdeveloped and developing countries were the colonies of various European countries. Africa was the colonies of various European countries. Those phases we will discuss about that part in the next one. So, what are the features of the traditional African form of cooperatives? Just now we have learned about various types of cooperative that comes under the traditional category. Even though they were the traditional concept, they were having wider scope and impact in the modern operations. So one of the main features of traditional African form of cooperative is wider scope, because it was able to help a large number of weaker sections of the society. Locally established. Locally established means these societies were having a grassroots operation in that area. Grassroots operation means they were having a well established system for providing assistance to the needy people. So they were locally established because local people will having support from these types of cooperative movements. These traditional societies were operating within the communities and social class. In Africa, there are a number of ethnic communities and tribes as well as different social class, and these societies were successful in running among within these communities as well as different social classes. Small in membership. Small in membership means number of persons within that society will be smaller. The membership is based on bonds, social class, income level, ethnic origin, occupation and professions. So on the basis of all these factors, the membership is given. Sometimes any one factor may be considered, or sometimes more than one factors may be considered. That depends upon the nature of the membership. Handle large amount of cash without any sort of security. These societies, we are not using society because it was implemented even before the concept of cooperation. These movements provided security in the sense means providing financial assistance without having any sort of security. So it was very easy for the people to access credit facilities from these movements. They worked on trust rather than agreements. Usually in cooperation, almost all the cooperative movements are based on agreements likewise. But in this movement, everyone worked on trust. Because in the previous module we have learned that in almost all cooperative movements, at the beginning they will be running successful, but by the end they will be failure. And in most cases the failure is due to the distrust and inefficiency of the various cooperative persons. Most of the movements or cooperative were temporary or seasonal or need based, because such movements will be started with the purpose of meeting any particular objective. Once that objective is completed, that movement will be dismantled. So in general, African cooperatives have certain values of modern cooperatives, and the modern cooperatives owe their success to the similarity with the traditional rotating savings and credit association. And many of the modern cooperative actions and activities were carried out on the base of the methods which has been followed by the traditional African forms of cooperatives. So the modern cooperation is very thankful to the traditional African form of cooperatives for availing the ideas for implementing in the modern perspective. So that was the concept of cooperative movement in Africa even before the colonialization. Next, we will be discussing about modern cooperatives in Africa. As we all know, Africa was once a colony of different European countries, and we all know that European countries consider various countries as their colony, not for protecting or supporting the people of that country. It is mainly done for exploiting the hard-earned money of that poor country. None of the colonies in the world was developed because of that European countries. European countries come to these countries, means these developing countries like Africa, India and some of the other Asian and other poor European countries, exploit and take away the wealth of these countries. So just like that, the various countries also came to the Africa. So the modern cooperatives in Africa begins from the colonial period. So colonial powers were the primary initiating force for implementing the modern cooperative in Africa. And We all know that these European countries come to these African and poor countries not for protecting the people of that developing country. They came mainly for their personal benefits. So the main motto of modern cooperative in Africa, or the motto of the colonial powers, was that it is not the development of Africa, but they want to create an economic system to increase their returns. Their returns means the returns of the colonial power. If it was British, then the Britishers came here not to protect or uplift the economy of the Africa, but in order to increase the wealth of the Britishers. That is why they implemented cooperative movement in Africa, not for protecting the people of Africa. They were implementing cooperation for their benefit only. But with the passage of time, the cooperation movement had automatically paved the way for protecting the poor people. That was the concept. And modern cooperative has two phases. One is colonial cooperatives, another is after independence cooperatives. And regarding these two phases, colonial cooperatives means various cooperative movements and societies that were implemented by various colonial powers. Various colonial powers means various colonial countries like United Kingdom, otherwise known as Britain, France, Portuguese, Dutch. We will be learning in detail regarding Britain and France. So cooperative movement that was implemented during the colonial period is known as colonial cooperatives, and the cooperative movement that was running in that African countries after the independence. After the independence means after the freedom from this colonial power. That from that point of time till now is known as after independence cooperatives. We will discuss in detail the concept of modern cooperatives in detail in the next section.